We're in Revelation chapter 21, and we have had 4 parts on the New Jerusalem already, and we will continue on because there is a lot of information. And also what we're trying to do is we're trying to show the overall plan and program of God with regard to the New Jerusalem. Almost every other so-called Christian church teaches that all the saints of God are going to come back to the earth and that the New Jerusalem is going to be the place where God is going to rule the universe. That, of course, is not true. God has 2 programs, prophecy and mystery. In prophecy, Israel is the agency over which her king, Jesus Christ, the King of the Jews, is going to rule from the New Jerusalem over saved Jews and saved Gentiles forever. In the dispensation of grace in which we're living, part of the mystery is that God is going to form a second group of people called the church, which is his body, in contradistinction to the nation, the family, which is his nation, Israel. And that we, different from that of Christ and the 12 apostles and the like, are seated with Christ in heavenly places. His humanity is seated here on the earth. His deity, as it was originally, at original creation, sits at the right hand of the throne of the majesty on high. Now, in conjunction with that, God has formed a second body of Christ called the church, of which, if you're saved in this age, you're a part of. That church is going to rule and reign where angels once ruled. Those that are fallen angels forfeit their thrones. Those that are the faithful angels, though they doubted, remember that brought on what we call the angelic conflict, still forfeited their thrones. The fallen angels forfeit their everlasting life in the sense that they are not going to be associated with God. They'll be thrown in the lake of fire forever. But the good angels, though they will not go to hell, yet they are demoted from the thrones that they once sat on. We will sit on those thrones, and they will be the heirs of those who are saved. So we have 3 distinct places in that it was created originally and will be in eternity future. Heaven 1 is the atmosphere around the earth. Heaven 2 is space where the stars are, but where the bulk of the angels live. Heaven 3, angels live there as well as they did originally on the new earth. Heaven 3 has angels, but it is the dwelling place of God. Now, in eternity future, God is going to bring all these things together again. The third heaven, the second heaven, the first heaven, in a dispensation called the fullness of times. We also call it eternity future, where he's going to reconcile all these things back to himself. They'll be back in realignment, both materially and spiritually, because no one who enters eternity future in any of these places will be unsaved. Now, in eternity future, as well as eternity past, there will be cities. And that's why we are talking about the New Jerusalem. We will not be, as such, associated with the New Jerusalem. But what this study does is tell us that there are other cities out there that we'll be associated with. The heavenly Jerusalem, or one of the cities in space where the angels now live, where we will take over to rule and reign in their stead, being the body of Christ. Now, one of the reasons that we know that there are cities is because we have studied it, where it says the heavenly Jerusalem is a city. The New Jerusalem, which will become the earthly Jerusalem, is a city. And that angels live in the cities, and they are throughout space. Now, one of the cities, originally, as we will see, was a city on earth that Lucifer had. It was his particular city where his throne was. It was from the earth and from this city, which controlled Jacob's ladder, which is the connecting point through space between heaven above and earth beneath, and through the vast expanse of space. Through that, he went up from the earth and invaded the third heaven. He tried to get the throne of Jesus Christ. He was kicked out of the third heaven back to the earth, and that became the second phase of the earth, as we will see here in just a moment. Now, before we get ahead of ourselves, I had a question with regard to the New Jerusalem and the new earth. That question was simply this: will we be able to visit? And the answer to that is yes, absolutely. I know that it is strange for us now because we're on this earth and none of us have ever seen an angel. All we've seen is science fiction, the Trekkies, the Star Wars, and the like. But the fact of the matter is, the Bible records that there are beings from outer space. Ooh, that sounds kind of weird. Yes, it would be. Do you not know the Bible? They are called angels. When Jesus Christ ascended, where did he ascend? Up to heaven. Well, where is that? Where's up from this point? You have to go through where to get to up or heaven above? You have to go through space. And so we have an atmosphere that's up. We have the stars that are up. That's the second heaven. We have the third heaven, so designated by Paul, that is up. But it's not far out. It is not weird if you understand the scriptures. Now, originally, Christ traveled from heaven above to earth beneath with a little R&R. Heaven above is called the mountain of God, or the sides of the north where legislative decisions were made. The Lord prepared his throne in the heavens. His kingdom rules over all. So you have his kingdom here, you have other kingdoms in space, and you have then Lucifer's kingdom originally on the earth. Now, of course, he lost that when he revolted against Jesus Christ. But that's the way it was. Before the fall of Lucifer, that was the original arrangement. Now, just let me say that before the fall of Lucifer, and indeed now, there is travel between heaven 3, heaven 2, and heaven 1. Who travels? And how do they do it? We studied in the hour preceding this one and many, many times before, Jacob's ladder, which is in the form of a cross in the middle of the universe. Heaven is his throne, earth is the footstool. There is a direct correlation up and down between the third and the first heaven. The thing that connects them both is Jacob's ladder. Now, through the iniquity of your traffic, said Jesus Christ to Lucifer in Ezekiel 28. What traffic? What traffic is he talking about? He's talking about the fact that Lucifer controlled the traffic of Jacob's ladder, or the subway, as it were. We have a subway under New York City. You've got a subway under London. You've got subways under various cities. Well, Jacob's ladder is a subway through space for direct flight between these places, so that angels can get hook on at the top and fly straight south, hook on at the bottom, fly straight north, as it were. We've studied the doctrine of the north, or can get off anywhere in between to go to their particular quadrant of space to rule and to reign. And that is exactly the way it is. To say it's different is to deny the scriptures. All of this is true. We've had literally now thousands of hours on subjects like these. And it's too difficult to go back and reteach them. You're just going to have to go from here. But that's the way that it is. Now, if these angels did it, will we be able to do it? The answer is absolutely. Though we will not live in the New Jerusalem, though we will not live on the earth, we're seated with Christ in heavenly places, still, we will be able to travel to the third heaven. We'll go back home wherever we are in space. We'll be able to travel to the earth, which will be reestablished as the garden of God, the place for R&R. That's what it was originally, and it will come back to that. All right. Now, we again know this is true because of the earth's 5 phases. Originally, and OJ is not the man, nor the juice. OJ is original creation. In original creation, earth had phase one. It was perfect. There was a city on the earth. Now we're going to read a couple of verses here and then go back to Jeremiah 4. John, verse number 2, saw the holy city, the New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven. And again, he says that in verse 10. Last part, the holy Jerusalem descending out of heaven from God. Well, where is heaven? Well, it's not the atmosphere. It's not space. It's the third heaven, because this is a city that has foundations, whose builder and whose maker is God. God made this city so that he could have his son, Jesus Christ, in his first body, the body that came from the Virgin Mary, as King of the Jews, rule over this. His second body, called the church, which is his body, is seated with and associated with Christ's deity in the heavenly places. That's where our sphere of blessing is. That's where we, as his body, will rule and reign with him forever. Now, let's go back to Jeremiah chapter 4. Jeremiah chapter 4. Phase 1 is the earth was created perfectly. We know Lucifer was on the earth. We know that it had vegetation. It was lush. It was beautiful. We know that it had clouds, because he said, I'm going to ascend above the clouds. I'm going to get into heaven itself and get the throne up there. Be like the Most High possessor of heaven and earth. And God created perfectly originally. Not only does the perfect tense dictate this, but God told Lucifer, you were perfect in all your ways until iniquity was found in you. Okay, when iniquity was found in Lucifer, God then judged the earth. That judgment is seen in Genesis 1, verses 2 and 3, where the earth became without form and void. He judged it with water. He took away light, and it became an ice planet, because there was total darkness with no light in it, therefore no heat. It was judged totally, like the flood of Noah was a universal flood, and because there was no heat, it froze. Now, do we know that there are cities there? Yes, we do. How? Jeremiah 4. We'll start reading with verse 23, but before we do, let me say that we are living during the final years of the present phase of earth, phase 3. During phase 3, we had men called prophets. Prophets could do two things with prophecy. Not being in the future, they could predict prospectively what was going to happen. And of course, it happened perfectly. There are still things to happen. But take, for example, all of the prophecies concerning the first advent of Jesus Christ. He'd be born of a virgin, and the wise men and things that were said and done and so forth. They came to pass exactly as the prophets foretold hundreds and some thousands of years before it ever happened. That is prospective prophecy looking ahead. And we're going to see there's prospective prophecy regarding the renovation of the earth and the New Jerusalem. The New Jerusalem's not here yet. Why? Because the new earth is not here yet. Those are two phases in the future. However, there is a second aspect of prophecy, and that is retrospective prophecy. Though the prophet was not there, Moses was not there whenever the earth was created. He was not there. Jeremiah was not there whenever the earth was judged in phase 2. However, just like they can look forward and predict, they can look backward and tell us exactly what happened and when these things happened. Phase 1, God created originally. Because of Lucifer's sin, God judged. Now note what all he judged. Verse 23 takes us back to Genesis 1:2. I beheld the earth, and lo, it was without form and void. We're told in Genesis 1:2, it became without form and void. The heavens, they had no light. Darkness was upon the face of the earth. It froze as it was flooded. The mountains, they trembled. The hills moved lightly. And behold, there was no man. Man was not created till phase 3 of earth. All the birds of the heaven were fled. There was an animal creation. That's where the dinosaurs were. They talk about the Ice Age. That's exactly where it happened. Only it didn't happen as the scientists said. It happened as a judgment of God on Lucifer, destroying this very beautiful planet and his pets, the dinosaurs. Only Lucifer could have a T-Rex for a pet. Okay. Now note this. I beheld, and lo, the fruitful places were a wilderness, and all the cities thereof were broken down at the presence of the Lord. Now, what does this tell us? That earth originally had cities, and that those cities were destroyed at the second phase, or the judgment of God, with water and ice here. Lucifer had a city. Other angels who lived on earth had cities. Others lived in space. They had planets and cities as well. And, of course, heaven. Phase 3 is where we now live. But now we're going to take and look at this for prospective prophecy. Let's go to the book of Isaiah. Isaiah chapter 65. Verse 17. Here is a prophecy during the third phase of earth, by the way, in which you now live, that looks forward to several events in the future. Of course, you're going to be associated with this somewhat because not just the earth is renovated, but the heavens and the earth are renovated. And since your planet and your throne and your city is somewhere in the heavenlies, seated with Christ there, they too are going to be renovated just specifically for you. But for some reason, God simply chooses to focus on the earth to tell us how this is going to come about. Verse 17, for behold, I create new heavens and a new earth. The former shall not be remembered nor come to mind. Remember, they are purged of sin, any taint, any stain, any corruption. Any putrefying factor is purged with fire. But be ye glad and rejoice forever in that which I create. Now note, here is a prediction of a new Jerusalem associated with the fourth and fifth stages of the earth. When the earth and the heavens are renovated and become new, God plants on this planet a new city. I create forever. Behold, I create Jerusalem a rejoicing and her people a joy. Chapter 66, same book. For as the new heavens and the new earth, this is verse 22, which I will make shall remain before me, saith the Lord, so shall your seed and your name remain. And it shall come to pass from one new moon to the other, from one Sabbath to the other, all flesh shall come and worship before me. Now, here's an interesting thing. We've talked about the celestial covenant that involves the solaric covenant, the sun, the lunaric, the moon, and the stellaric, all of the stars. They will exist forever. Obviously, you can't have people coming to the new Jerusalem on the new earth, celebrating the feast of the new moon, which were Israel's specific feast, unless there is a what? You got to have a moon. And so this moon is going to last forever. And of course, we don't have time this morning, but we'll get to it eventually. Let's turn to 2 Peter. 2 Peter. Chapter 3. Verse 5 takes us right back to phase 2 of earth. They're willingly ignorant of this, that by the word of God the heavens were of old, and the earth stood out of the water and in the water, whereby the world that then was, being overflowed with water, perished. The heavens and earth which are now in phase 3 are by the same word are kept in store, reserved unto fire against the day of judgment and perdition of ungodly men. That happens when the heavens and earth are being renovated or purged. This is when the great white throne judgment takes place, so that every unsaved person is relegated and consigned to the lake of fire, and then the new arrangement of things with the heavens and the earth, the cities thereof, will be established. So, note verse 10. The day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, which the heavens shall pass away with great noise, the elements shall melt with fervent heat, the earth also and the works that are therein shall be burned up. Seeing then that all these things shall be dissolved, what manner of persons ought ye to be in all holy conversation and godliness? See, we're living in an age here where people want to put all their eggs in one basket on this planet. They're trusting all the material things, all the new fads, all the new trends to get them through in life. However, they're building their empires, they're building their nest eggs, and the Apostle Peter says that's fine, you need to take care of life. However, not taking care of spiritual things is wrong. Why? Simply because all these other things are going to be burned up. They're going to go up in a puff of smoke. They're all going to, everything you have done on this earth, unless it was done under the power of the Holy Spirit for God's glory, is up in smoke. And that's what he's telling us here. Therefore, we're looking for, verse 12, to the coming of the day of God, where the heavens shall be on fire and dissolved, and we, according to his promise, we just read his promise in Isaiah, look for new heavens and a new earth, wherein dwelleth righteousness. So let's go back to Revelation chapter 21. Phase 4, renovation of the planet. Phase 5, at that point, the reestablishment of life and cities throughout the universe, and especially on planet Earth. Now, one of the reasons that we have done this is because sometimes during our morning sessions, the light is so bright we can't see the overhead. We'll solve that one day. But to this point, one of the cities that will be in existence in the dispensation of the fullness of times on earth, the capital city of earth, and the dominion surrounding the earth, which we will look at, is this city. And what we have is a conception, according to what the Bible says, of what the New Jerusalem will be like. The New Jerusalem is not heaven. We read verses where it comes down out of heaven from God. It is the earthly Jerusalem, and it's in association with the new earth. Verse 1, chapter 21. And I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. And I, John, saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem. And again in verse 10, it talks about that great city, the holy Jerusalem. So, however you want to say it, this is the city wherein dwelleth righteousness. It's associated with God making everything new. We talk about urban renewal. Look at verse number 5. He that sat upon the throne said, Behold, I make all things new. So the heavens and the earth will be renovated, cooled down, reformed, reestablished with life. Cities will be placed on it. One of the cities on one of the planets will be earth, and it will be called the New Jerusalem. It is called a great city in that it is massive in size. However, heaven itself is bigger than the New Jerusalem. We'll look at its measurements here in just a little bit. But it is specifically said to be a holy city. No unsaved people will ever get in there. In fact, no unsaved people will ever see the New Jerusalem. The great white throne and their consignment to the lake of fire happens before the New Jerusalem is established on the earth. Now, let's just take a look at some of its features. Verse number 11. We'll have time this morning, I think, to look at just one part of its jewelry. For some reason, when we talk about gold, silver, and precious stone, eyes light up, faces smile, ears, heads are cocked so that you can get your good ear my way, and you want to hear about that. Well, as you can see, this is a gorgeous city. As old-time pastors would say, it's resplendent in its glory. We can say it too. It is. It's beautiful. Now, Diane, if you'd put the second chart up there and make ready then to put the third chart up in just a few moments. Verse number 11 in chapter 21. Having the glory of God, and her light was likened to a stone most precious. That the earth? Okay. Jasper stone, clear as crystal. Some have likened the jasper in this particular setting. Again, you have to go back to when the stone that John had in mind, rather than how language has changed to this point. The jasper stone was likened to a diamond, but it could be very, very colorful, could have other colors. For those of you that saw the movie Titanic, the diamond, the heart of the sea, was what color? Blue. And it was beautiful. And I think that lady was silly for throwing it in the ocean when we could have, talk about floating, we could have floated lots of Grace churches, started a school, and so forth. Just that one little rock, forget the rest of the diamonds. That thing was beautiful. Anyway, it caught my attention too. But when she threw it in the sea, my heart sunk. Forget the Titanic. It went down. But some have said that because it talks about the city being clear as crystal, that the city foursquare is encased in a crystal. I don't believe that that's true. It doesn't say that. It says that it's like jasper stone, clear as crystal. There's a difference. One would have it if it had a crystal around it. Some have tabulated that crystal. Now, we've just come through the Christmas season. We've all seen the little houses in the crystals where you turn them upside down and shake them and it snows. That's what we're talking about here. They would be encased in crystal. That encasement would be 8,100 and some odd miles long, or round rather, in circumference. But of course, that's not true. It's just simply talking about the emission of the light of the city, the reflection of the light going round about it. It's clear as crystal. In other words, there's no smog that surrounds the New Jerusalem. You can see it perfectly, clearly, on any given day. It is beautiful. If that were true, if there were an encasement around it where you would go from this point to this point rather than from simply square to square as it's laid out here. Some have said that it would be 2,600 miles across from this point to this point. Now, the reason that I give that figure is because our moon is, in diameter, 2,160 miles across. So the New Jerusalem gives our own moon a run for its money with regard to size. It is a very massive city. That's why it's called great. It's the great city. But not only that, it is beautiful. Note verse 12. It had a great a wall that was great and high, 12 angels at the gates. The names written thereon were the 12 names of the 12 tribes of the children of Israel. 3 gates on the east, 3 in the north, 3 in the south, 3 in the west, verse 13. The wall of the city had 12 foundations, and then the names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. He took a golden reed to measure the city, the gates thereof, and the wall thereof. Now, if you want to measure this, and that's why we have the two charts up there the way we do now. I've given you what it is in relation to the earth, the circumference of the earth, 36,000 miles. It will take up 1,500 square miles, as we'll see, but it's close in size to our own moon. How do we know? Well, he's going to measure the city. Verse 15, also the last part of verse 15, he's going to measure the gates and the wall. Now, since there is not a separate measurement for the gates, we must assume that the height of the wall is the height approximately of the gates, not the width, because there are three of them apportioned equally across each of the fronts, but the height thereof, because there's not a separate measurement for these gates. The city lies four square. Tonight we'll go back over why it is a cube. It is not round. It is not a pyramid. It is four square. It is absolutely a cube. It's large as the breadth. Measure the city with a reed, 12,000 furlongs. If you round that off, going from one edge to one edge is approximately 1,500 miles long. Every edge that you see here is 1,500 miles long, according to this. The length, the breadth, the height of it are equal. He measured the wall thereof 144 cubits, according to the measure of a man. Now, there's the royal cubit, 25 inches. There is the common cubit, which was taken from the elbow to the longest finger of the hand. That was 18 inches. That's the measure of the common man, what we're told here. Therefore, the wall, the height of the wall and of the gates was approximately 216 feet high. Now, if you would, Diane, if you'd put the next. Here's what we're going to do with the moments we have remaining. It talks about the fact here that the gates were of pearl. So what we're going to do is just simply focus on this for the remaining moments that we have, and look at the differences between the other gems and the valuable things of this city and these gates, and why. Chapter 21 of Revelation, it says in verse number 12, it had a wall great and high and 12 gates. And then in verse number 21, it says, and the 12 gates were 12 pearls. Every several gate was of one pearl. Now, I don't know about you, but God must have a sea in heaven itself that is beyond compare with our sea. Could you imagine an oyster that gave birth to a pearl that was 216 feet high or thereabouts? I'll tell you what, that oyster could feed a lot of people for a long time. But what we want to do as we're closing out part 5 is to look at this. It's the Greek word margarites, not the drink. I knew what you all were thinking. But that simply means from an oyster to a Greek. Mexicans didn't invent their language till sometime after. What we have here is showing you basically part of the wall, part of the city, one of the gates, and one of the pearls. We're going to bring a good application here, I believe. The substance of this city is wealthy beyond compare. But in comparing the wealth of these various things, we've got to note some differences. And why? First of all, gold. All of us know that gold is mined. It is then melted, and then it is shaped and formed. In other words, the New Jerusalem didn't always exist. God had to conjure up some gold here, and that's the way that gold comes, of course, in association with this city. That's what's in our mind. The second thing with regard to it is the stones. Stones also are mined, but instead of being melted, they are chipped away or faceted in order to reflect the light. So, though these things are valuables, very beautiful, reflect light and such, they are literally made of non-living material. Note, gold has no life, stones have no life, and they are extracted or brought forth in different ways. One is melted and formed, one is then chipped away and faceted. But look at the pearl. The pearl was formed by what? A living organism. Something alive. Now, what does a pearl do? A pearl just floats away in the little sea, eating, enjoying itself below the ocean, and all of a sudden, either a little piece of sand or a parasite gets in its shell. Now, it doesn't have little fingers so that it can go and take it, open up its mouth, and ding it out. It begins the process of dealing with this irritation. And what does it do? It begins secreting a substance called nacre. Nacre is what forms the luster of the shell and the inside of the shell with its living tissue. And it begins secreting some of this, no matter how large or small the particular substance is on the inside. This living organism begins taking care of this irritation by covering the irritation with part of itself, until concentrically it begins building a bigger and bigger circle, until eventually the irritation of the piece of sand or whatever it is, the foreign object that came in, is lost in favor of this massive covering of the foreign object. Now, this is exactly what God has done with regard to our sin. A foreign object came into his universe, the clamshell, and it posed a threat to the way things were, an irritation. And God got rid of the irritation. How did he do that? By covering the sin with his own righteousness. And that's what the pearl is. The most valuable, some pearls, of course, are various colors, but we know them to be white. And this pearl not only reflects light, as do the metals and the stones, but it absorbs light and is a perfect type of God, who is light. Not only that, a lot of pearls are iridescent. That is, all of the colors of the rainbow are seen here. And of course, we know that in emitting light, that certain parts of the light strike certain things differently, and that's the way God does differently, showing the perfect unity of his attributes and character in every situation of life. The perfect white light is always righteous, but the way that it reflects back is the way he deals with the certain situations. And the reason that this is a pearl is because it was made of a living organism who covered the irritation with himself and solved the problem. Therefore, it's part of the gates of the city. When you come in through the gates of the city, you are looking at a gate that typifies God himself, that did away with sin and the problem by covering it with his righteousness. And therefore, the gates are provided eternally for all those who believe in him. Let's turn to Matthew 13, just quickly. Matthew 13. That is why the kingdom of heaven on earth, is likened to a pearl. Verse 45. The kingdom of heaven is likened to a merchant man seeking goodly pearls. Verse 46. Who, when he had found one pearl of great price, went and sold all that he had and bought it. The pearl of great price is the kingdom. But the pearl of the gates of the New Jerusalem typifies something. Different from the metal and different from the stone, the pearl is the only thing that came from a living organism that utilized itself to solve the problem of irritation, corruption within its own environment and system. And God did the very same thing in the person of his Son. He covers our sin with his own righteousness so that you can no longer see the source of irritation without cracking that pearl. But the irritation and the pearl become one. They are calcified and so forth, become one. So that's no longer a problem for the oyster. Sin is no longer a problem for God. Therefore, he can keep the gates open because he has taken care of the sin problem.